Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the Boom Podcast. As I've said all along, I'm bringing heavy hitters to my podcast that can help you, the small business owner, or even the solo professional, walk away with tangible tips and strategies to go back to your own thing and use them. I don't want another podcast where we're just listening to people talk about their life story with no rhyme or reason. Story matters. But to me, execution, strategy, tips, all the reason why we listen to podcasts. I hope. Anyway, our third guest is one of my personal favorites on LinkedIn, which you might be asking yourself, who is this guy? He's not a LinkedIn influencer, let me tell you. He should be. He has such a powerful backstory that I'm kind of confused where he's going with LinkedIn. That's not a criticism. That's just simply this kind of background. You should be publishing books and going on speaking tours. So, nevertheless, this is my friend Peter. And Peter has a bunch of titles. I'll let him introduce himself. But I like Peter for a variety of reasons. He is super sharp, super smart, and he sees things from a different angle that most of us, even myself included, don't always think about because we're really operating from our silos a lot of time. And it's no surprise, given his background, he's able to see different ways of looking at the same problem. And that's why I brought him on. So, Peter, please introduce yourself to everybody. Who are you and what do you do?
Wow, Doug, I don't even know how to even respond to that. It was so good. You got everything right that I wrote down for you. I felt bad because my podcast is kind of useless now that I think about how yours is so purposeful. So I'm Pete Durand. Doug and I met last year on LinkedIn, actually. I think for the same reason. We're both incredibly handsome bald guys on LinkedIn. There's a special club. It's hard to get into, but the first thing I got to do is shave your head. So, my background is interesting is probably the best word, right? So I've been the CEO of several small businesses, started my own companies, have had the chance to work in, multiple disciplines, most recently, probably heavily slanted on sales, marketing, digital marketing, et cetera. That's kind of my favorite sweet spot. I've had the good fortune of consulting with several organizations and recently worked with a company called Saebo, which does stroke rehab products. And one of my first investors at my startup in healthcare 10 years ago is a large investor there, asked me to consult. And then recently they've asked me to become CEO. So I'm back in an operating role. I love it, leading a business, but I was only drawn, I had several other opportunities. I was drawn to Saebo because of their mission. Their customers truly write the most amazing testimonials, Doug, about how our products and services and our people have helped them recover after a stroke. So when you read them, you can't get help but drawn into the mission and the purpose, and everyone that works there feels the same way. So I get great joy in working with people and customers like that. Over the past 5 years, I built a consultancy, both from a strategy and marketing perspective, but also ended up doing a lot of recruiting for companies in what I'll call critical customer-facing roles or C-level roles or sales roles. So I have the good fortune of letting that company continue to run. I've got good people helping me there. And that's where most of my LinkedIn content is focused. And that's really building teams, understanding how to recruit people. And this great resignation has given me a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of content about that.
There is probably too much content and not enough good content. I'll just put it that way. So you're right. I am not a LinkedIn influencer. I'm probably not doing any of the things you need to do in order to do that, right? I don't post selfies. I have grown kids who would be mortified if they saw my picture in their feed every day. And they're in the business world. They're heavily on LinkedIn. So they would be, it'd be hard for them. And I write what I think, I write what I feel. I'm probably not doing all the things to promote my content the way it is, but the people that I do connect with, much more deep and meaningful relationships. And I tend to, in fact, yesterday I got a note from someone I haven't spoken to in 10 years. And her message was, your content is shining a light. Please keep doing it. When you get those, that's all that matters.
Cool, man. I have a question. It's going to sound funny, but it's a very serious question. And there's
Sure.
a point to it. How old are you?
I'm almost 54.
Okay, because you don't look 54 at all. I mean, I'm reading your bio. You started when I was pretty much going to high school.
Yeah.
So, and when I was reading that, wow, this is, I mean, do you work out a lot? Or have you always looked that way?
No, I work out every day pretty hard. So oddly enough, I actually hold a patent on how to measure fitness. I ran a health and fitness company for 10 years. So it's a big part of my life. I tend to eat right. My wife thinks I'm nuts because I like to exercise and I like to eat healthy. So I'm kind of weird that way. But I've been blessed. All three of my kids are Division I caliber athletes. So they get more of that competition from their mother than they do from me. She's the most competitive person in the family by far. So, oh yeah. I don't care if we're playing cards, golf, tennis, tiddlywinks. She's pretty competitive.
You know, I'm personally the competitive person in my family. My wife thinks I'm not because I'm competitive. Because my son plays lacrosse right now. Every time I see the game, I just want to go in. I just want to grab a set and go in and take care of it myself. I don't care if I have no experience. Everybody's doing it wrong and not show up on the other team. Let me have a shot. Move. You know, I can't get rid of it. I played a lot of sports growing up. I was in semi-pro rugby for many years. So it's just a very natural part of my makeup. And I'm sure it's like that for you, especially when you were watching your kid play sports.
I think most of us have that. I tend to be there's a switch that flips for me when I'm watching sports. And it takes a while for it to flip, but if it does, it gets pretty ugly. My wife will walk to the other side of the field away from me. You've probably seen this, Doug, if your son plays lacrosse. After I've watched sports for 20 years at a fairly competitive level from the sidelines, and we've seen some pretty horrible dad moments, right? Where to the point where we actually were sitting in the sideline one year and we went on GoDaddy and bought the domain don'tbethatdad.com. And we wrote short stories.
I am that daddy, by the way. I am that dad. Yeah. Let's bring me up to the next question. Does that mean that urge that we talked about just right now, does that come to business at all for you? Are you driven by being competitive? I find different entrepreneurs, if I may call you that, are driven by different things, but it seems you can't be doing the things you listed in your LinkedIn bio without some sense of drive. Am I right?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think if you can get up at 5:30 in the morning and work out every day for 30 years, you have to have some sort of drive. So naturally, if I set a goal, if I set, I'm going to do this number of reps, no matter what, if I'm throwing up, I do it. And if I have to grind out a bunch of, just like you, Doug, if you have to grind out a bunch of pieces of content through the weekend, even though it takes 12 hours, you just do it. So I think I'm fairly driven. I'm not, however, it's interesting. I'm not motivated by money, which is really odd for an entrepreneur. I think 30 years ago, I was probably more motivated by recognition, taking on more responsibility, but I've never really been motivated by my bank account. My wife would tell you if she was on the podcast, I probably should be a bit more motivated by money. But when you start, well, when you start a business, it's a tremendous financial risk. And I've started a couple and ran a couple and been fortunate to be in some really good situations. I've had a couple incredibly horrible flameouts as an entrepreneur, which I probably learned more during than anything else. But I'm definitely motivated by certain things and not by others, right? I don't have that fire where I need to be the jerk on the field to win, but I certainly do enjoy, seeing my efforts produce results.
So take me back to what was the call to be an entrepreneur? Because you, first of all, in 1999, you were the director of e-business and GE.
Yeah.
So, and then right after that, it's this long chain of what I would consider a very entrepreneurial type journey. What happened at GE that made you take that kind of a journey?
Well, it's a great question, Doug. No one's asked me that before, but it actually starts right before my time at GE. So in 1997, I got recruited to go work for a small startup in Southern California. And my wife and I were living in Wisconsin. I got a call and flew out to Santa Ana. And this is great. I landed in Orange County Airport. And by the way, you're from Chicago, right, Doug? So we both know what the weather's like in January in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. So I land in Southern California. It's 78, sunny, no humidity. I walk into this office, and this is how startup money flowed back in the late 90s. It was ridiculous. This company raised like $30 million, no revenue. They had a CEO and a president who had these huge glassed 25 by 30 offices. They're sitting in these leather recliners, no socks,
they haven't
loafers.
done anything that, right?
They're writing software, right? And they've got Hawaiian shirts on. I walk in with a suit and tie. The CEO walks up with a scissor and cuts my tie off and says, "Sit down, let's talk," and hands me a glass of Chardonnay.
No, why? That sounds like a movie, by the way.
This was like a movie.
Scene of a movie.
So I'm probably 28, 29 years old at this time. Yeah, I'm 28, right? And I looked at him and said, "Just get a little colorful. Shit, I'll clean the bathrooms if I can work here. I want to work here." So it was right in my space. I knew the technology. I knew the company. I went to work there for a few years and learned that I got the entrepreneurship bug. I loved being with a small group of people, trying to solve problems till 2:00 in the morning, drinking ridiculous amounts of coffee. We worked every day. I had 2 young kids. That was a little bit interesting, but I married up. My wife was awesome. And from there, I got the bug. The company kind of imploded. It was my first experience of what startups could do. GE was one of 2 customers we signed in my entire there. Only 2 customers. I signed both of them. And my boss, the guy that I met with at GE, was a guy named Joe Hogan. Joe took Jeff Emmelt's job when Jeff became CEO. So Joe was one of the top guys in GE. And I was very lucky to go to work for Joe at General Electric. E-business was a big thing. I got my ass handed to me there. It was the first company that said, "Hey, Pete, you're pretty good at these 4 things, but you really suck at these 6 things."
Wow. And I love that feedback, by the way. It's very rare in life. People tell you what you suck at. I mean, very clearly. At least for me, people are very nice about things, but it's interesting. People told you specifically, you suck at these 6 things. What were they? Do you remember?
Well, the best example is, at GE, particularly, I got brought in what's called E-band at the executive level, which is unusual. And I worked with what I'll call an interdivisional team running e-business across the whole company. So I would go to meetings with other top executives throughout GE, and I got put on a bit of a fast track. That there's a list that they call it. So I was considered a high pot. But I was used to being in my previous companies, typically the guy that people would at the end of the meeting look to and say, "What do we do?" So that's my natural tendency to say, "All right, here's how we're going to take these things we've talked about." It was fairly collaborative, but I was clearly driving the ship. I tried that in front of one of my boss. I had 2 bosses at GE, Joe and another guy that I matrixed up to. I tried that in a meeting, and everybody smiled politely. I thought the meeting went well, and I left. And my mentor at the time, I asked him to be a mentor, called me and said, "Dude, you just totally screwed that up." So what do you mean? He goes, "Everyone in that room is an A player, and you basically try to get it done your way." He goes, "I don't care if it's the right way. It's not the way. So you need to figure out how to work with 10 really smart people in a room and get the best way, not your way, not his way. Just find the best way and pull it out of everybody. Make it collaborative. You need to figure out how to do that as a leader if you move up the food chain." No one had ever said that to me before. And he said, "You've got a lot of repair work because those people all put a target on your back because you've got to figure out how to build that up." So the next year I said, "Larry, could we talk every week?" He was in New York and I was in Virginia. "And could you mentor me?" And he did. Every week we had an hour-and-a-half phone call, and he said, "This went well. This didn't go well. Think about this." A year and a half later, when I went to lead my first startup back as a president in the 2001, I think it was, I ended up working with some people I'd worked with earlier in my career. And they all looked at me and said, "Dude, what happened? I mean, I loved working with you before, but you're a completely different leader now." So I owe that to my time at GE. I think they did a great job developing leaders. There's a lot of debate about other things about GE, but they were really good at developing talent.
They are. I mean, I've never personally met anybody from GE, but the books I've read from Jack and certain, tons of books about GE. It's very much a leadership factory. You know, it's also a giant bureaucracy. But Jack was very big on developing leaders within the org to make it as powerful as it could ever be. And you should have walked away with a taste of that, right?
Oh, I did. To give you an idea how Jack influenced that company, I actually was flying to Virginia to interview for a VP of services job. In the air, Jack sent a memo to all the CEOs inside of GE and said, all of you will have an e-business executive on your staff by Monday. So by the time I took off and landed, I interviewed for a different job. I literally went in the office and Joe said, hey, by the way, I don't have anybody that could do this. You could. Would you interview for this job? So a week later, I had a different job that I even flew out and interviewed. I was running e-business, which is, and I've never seen a company where the CEO could drive change as rapidly as Jack could. He could say, we will only use purple Post-it notes from this point forward. And the next morning, there would be purple Post-it notes on everyone's desk somehow. You don't know how it happened, but that would be there. It's just amazing.
That's strange because, you know, most people equate corporation as slow.
Yep.
It was the opposite of a startup. And Jack ran it almost like a perpetual startup for such a long time. Quick changer. I don't know a whole lot about it, but what you read, it sounds like a startup. He treated it very much like one, which is quite fascinating. And do you still use the principles you've learned from GE even up to today? Do you still use the stuff you learned from GE at this point today in your career?
Very much so.
That's a 30-year lesson. You know,
yeah, I had a 360 there, which is a really in-depth, powerful way to have your leaders, your peers, and the team that works for you give you feedback in a very blunt way. And I had a peer on the leadership team who I did not get along with. He was from a consultancy, had a very different way of approaching the world that I did, but he was smart as shit, Doug. I mean, he was way smarter than I was, without a doubt. But our styles were very different and just very different. And he shredded me on my 360. I mean, just shredded me. And Joe sat there with me. He goes, I've never had a 360 like this, Pete. He goes, it's binary. You got a 90%. Everyone thinks you're off the charts. This one person, and there's no names, we knew who it was, shredded you. And he goes, you're both on my team. I need you both for different reasons. You figure it out. You got to figure out how to work with this guy. And great feedback. He said, you have to understand what his perception is and why it's driving this opinion of you and go address it. So we talked about it. He gave me some tips. Some of it was gamemanship, Doug, I'll be honest. Some of it was legitimate things that I had to change about how I approached communicating with other people like that. And, ultimately I respected this person. I just had to change the way I communicated with them. So, and as my kids got older, I look back on that as a parenting thing. And I look at that 360 and I look at the areas that were strong and the areas that were weak. And I make sure I go back and look at those weaknesses and try to address them.
This is fascinating because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I've ever had that type of training in my entire life. And I actually crave it. I crave feedback, but I'm very much a independent contractor. So if somebody doesn't like you, you're simply not going to work the next day. There's no feedback about what you do. It's either it's working or it's not working. If it's not, there's no invoice coming anytime soon. So, so my meat grinder of sort is avoiding that no payment thing, and what in a way had morphed at me hard in terms of how far can you go to make them appease somebody, and how far can you go not to stick with what you know is right. Sure. Regardless if you get paid the next month. And my last 10 years have been that type of journey. And it's just fascinating because you have, obviously, because of the organization, they have people there to help you. When you're a vendor, a contract person, you don't have any of that. The best case scenario, you're going to have to hire a $10,000 a month coach to tell you that kind of thing. And I refuse to do that. But it's fascinating. I'm slightly jealous you got through the meat grinder so early, which set you up for the rest of your journey, right?
Yep. Yeah, I would agree. I think I have been fortunate that I've had friends or peers who have been good coaches for me along the way. And you're right. It's not, I'm not spending enough time with them for them to charge me, but over a cup of coffee, if I'm honest about what's going well and not going well, they're happy to nudge me back and, in the right lane and keep me grounded. By the way, my wife, probably the best at it. So her intuition is pretty spot on, and she can tell I'm maybe not doing some things well or not aligned properly. She'll put me back in my place easily.
My wife's the same way in a weird way because I'm stubborn. So she'll tell me, she'll give me feedback about the thing. I say, you don't know what you're talking about. And of course, that didn't play well. And then 6 months later, she's right. It's like, okay, so it's, the stubbornness on my part, but it seems to me you actually listen to your wife on the first few times and you fully embrace that. I guess I'm a little too stubborn in that regard, but my wife ultimately gives me fantastic feedback along the way. Did you always listen to her that openly, or did you resist that first and then it stopped?
I've always been a pretty decent listener. I've maybe not always been the best learner. So I'll give you an example of what I mean there. My parents were both good examples and also very comfortable at telling me, to shove it up my ass. I'm not doing things the right way. So I like to think on the personal parenting, health kind of things. I married way up. I've had really good feedback from friends and family. So I feel like that part of our life has been pretty solid. From a business perspective, while I was a good listener, I probably wasn't learning enough. And okay. Yeah, I have learned, and by the way, probably too late in life. And to your point, Doug, very, very good. When we were both early entrepreneurs, right? Small companies, one or two of us, maybe three or four of us. When you're the CEO/small business owner, you're so busy doing, you don't have enough time to learn. And LinkedIn wasn't around when I first started doing this, right? So I can get on LinkedIn in the morning and I can find 25 tips or articles or whatever that somebody's already curated for me that I follow and read them and be challenged by them. I didn't do that early in my career as a leader. So I'll be honest, I probably made business mistakes, strategy mistakes. There's a list of things, 2 or 3 things I did in my first startup where I just completely screwed the pooch, right? That cost me a ton of money. Had I been considering part of my daily activity, lifelong learning, I may have avoided some of those things. But for 5 or 6 years, I was drowning. And if you'd have handed me a book, that would have been it, right? That would have been enough to put me under the water for good. So I think today LinkedIn offers people a lot more free coaching, right? If you want free coaching, go to LinkedIn. If I wanted to learn how to create content, I'm going to follow you, Doug, right? That's free. People don't take advantage enough yet. So that's probably one of the biggest lessons. I was maybe listening, but I just wasn't learning enough.
You're making me a little speechless here because you're making me think, you're a good listener, but you struggle to learn. Mm-hmm. I think that's a mind-blowing statement to make. You should make a post about that, by the way. But you're so right. The whole reason this podcast is set is because a lot of my clients, past and present, are so busy doing that they don't have time to learn. And, I have a client right now who's so overwhelmed that I can't get on a call with him to solve the problem because he's too busy flying all over the country, putting out fires that probably he made himself. But if he just took a step back, took a breather, and approached it a different way, he would be better off. So what quick tip would you give somebody who fits that category? Good listener, but poor learner, and also overwhelmed at the moment. How can they start to get not so overwhelmed? They start pulling back and think strategically.
Well, there's probably 3 things that I would consider, and they're not easy things to do, right? They're not. So number 1, what can you outsource from your daily life that makes things easier? That's difficult because if you want to bring on a professional, it's going to cost you money. It's an investment. And a lot of people don't want to do that. But so my podcast is a great example, Doug. When I started my podcast a couple of years ago, I shot a lot of episodes early over a very short period of time to try to get as much content out there. I spent 6 to 8 hours every Saturday and Sunday doing editing. And it was not a good use of my time, right? It took time away from my family, took time away from my personal, I couldn't decompress. a year ago, I partnered with Spotify. Billy Sloan-Sleeve is a great guy. He was early starting his company, and it's one of the single things I point to over the past year that has made my podcast not only a joy, but an avid part of my business, because they do all the post-production for me, and it has saved me countless hours. So number one, just remove anything off your daily calendar or weekly calendar that can be outsourced. And that the value I get from that as part of my business is immeasurable. Number two, I think you've got to block your time. So I block my entire week. Whatever I have to do, I actually put tasks into my calendar under specific times. That's not new. A lot of people do it, but I actually try to stick to it. And I think the last thing, back to your point about going from drowning and listening to learning, I try to block 90 minutes every morning. It seems a lot for LinkedIn. It's where my research business.
That's a lot.
It is.
For a lot of people, 90 minutes is a whole lifetime to a lot of the folks we're talking about.
It is. So I'm at 5:30 every morning from 5:30 to 7. I engage in other people's content, and then I do my posts. And sometimes I've prepared a post earlier. I've taken notes or written something down, and then I clean it up and then get it out there. So sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's 90 minutes if I see a lot of really good content out that I'm engaging with. And then what I also do at that time is I'm looking at probably several different types of content. I'm looking for sales, marketing, product leaders. I'm also looking for people in the executive search space, and I'm looking for a lot of marketing people. And I'll take a good post or article or a book and send it to my marketing team and say, we should consider these 3 or 4 things. Now, what's great is I'm seeing my marketing team already in those posts commenting and liking. So they're already, they have now engaged in the same people. They're proactively in the content. So that means I don't necessarily have to do that unless I want to just have a comment with it. So my engagement on LinkedIn is not necessarily to promote my personal brand. It's primarily to learn. And I'm learning a lot.
Interesting, because I don't think the small business owner goes on LinkedIn to learn. They're either trying to promote their business or trying to find talent. And, they're not there to treat it like a classroom.
Oh, there's so much free content out there if you just know where to look.
Oh, there's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to, you'll gravitate towards people with good content, right? So there's a couple marketing firms that I follow, and every one of the key people in that organization publishes just amazing, thought-provoking content. It's thousands of dollars of free consulting if you just pay attention.
You know what? I think I know one of which you're talking about, because I've seen you in the content. Chris Walker and his whole
You got
team.
it. Refine Labs.
I'm a big fan of that type of business model, so to speak. So you're definitely a fan of Chris Walker, yes.
Yeah, Chris Walker and their entire team. He's built an amazing team in the last year, and he's allowed every one of those people to build their own personal brand. So
there's the guy with the big beard who does wild TikTok. Never mentioned Chris Walker's company,
he's
but still drive traffic to their website.
Yeah, you're right. I consider personal brands, and I've said this before. I'm going to coin this. This is my quote. I've coined this. Personal brands are the rising tide that floats all ships, which is the company brand. So if you allow everybody's personal brand to do its thing, it will lift the whole company's brand up. And it's hard for leaders to think, well, why is Doug spending time on LinkedIn when he should be working? Well, if Doug's doing his job, Doug's looking at other content curators, other influencers, people that can help make his job better. And he's offering up value for those people as well. So Doug becomes, over time, whether it's officially labeled as an influencer, people will go to Doug's content to learn some things. So it's hard. I worked with some companies that didn't like it, didn't want it to happen, and they were just missing the boat.
And let's talk about personal brand for a second, and come at it from your CEO mindset and your claw mindset. Okay. Now, I just put out a post probably 10 minutes before you came on. And I said, really short, I said, our brand strategy, the Pied Piper of the marketing world, in most cases, yes, not sad. And now, don't get me wrong, my point isn't brand doesn't matter. My point, there's a video attached to it, is that nobody can tell you outside of yourself what your brand is.
Right.
Ultimately, it's a combination of you and your audience. It's a relationship between you and the audience, and it grows over time. And there are people who artificially try to create a brand. They're going to say, hey, we're going to be mean and edgy. Let's go get them and start doing that. And sometimes, most times, it's going to fall flat. And they're going to say, but we did our customer voice research. We did market research. We have these great PowerPoint slides. Look, this is going to work. And I said on the video, that's a hypothesis. You know, you're testing a hypothesis that hasn't been tested yet. What I'm trying to say is, let your content become the brand over time. If I told you that, if you hired me to write content for you or your team, and I said that to you in a meeting, would your crow brain be ringing alarm bell because you will want direct, timely attribution to your content, right? Or am I wrong? You might be different. So I've said this to other people similar to you, and that doesn't make sense. And so I'm just curious to hear from you.
So it's interesting. I think there's many types of people on LinkedIn. There are people who are 100% pursuing vanity metrics, right? So if you want a lot of followers and a lot of likes and a lot of comments, today you've got to post either very professional, incredibly well lit images of yourself that you shot in a studio, and you shot 100 of them, and then you put them in a library, and every day you post one of them, right? And these people are typically incredibly good looking, right? So that's not going to work for me, Doug, right? The other thing is, there are a couple other people that are doing more casual, more funny images, but I'm not, and they'll get 10,000 views and 200 comments. Now, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I would guess 9,900 of those views and the majority of those comments are not customers. They're just people who maybe aren't happy with themselves, they're just trolling. They like stuff. They want to be in the club, but they're not customers. So there's a lot of vanity there. And I think eventually you get enough volume that customers start to roll in there, right? So I'm not discounting that. They do a much more thoughtful, proactive LinkedIn presence than I have. They have more followers. I'm not, first of all, I'm just not comfortable with the selfie concept. It's just not, it's not how I roll. By the way, I'm a confident, happy dude. It's just not me. So your thought about how fast do you want attribution to your content? For me, I don't view content as an instant metric. To me, content, as you described it, is a slow burn. It takes a while for you to find your voice and establish your brand, and you have to listen to what people are reacting to. And sometimes, by the way, LinkedIn is very confusing to follow.
Yes,
right? There's no rhyme or reason. I did a post 3 weeks ago, Doug, you and I commented back and forth on it. It went viral. I got 170,000 views of this thing, and it was stupid. It had nothing to do with my target audience or my point of view. I almost was just kind of testing it, and it went crazy. I was just on LinkedIn. I saw it like it was getting 5,000 views an hour. It was nuts. I did another post the next day that I really liked, I was proud of, and I got 3,000. I don't know what the difference was, right? But actually, you and I talked late last year, and a couple of things registered in our conversation, and it was a little breakthrough moment for me. I was so worried about how my content would be perceived, I overthought it. And I tried to manufacture topics, right? What's out there, whatever. And in January, I said, Pete, you're going to get consistent. And I'm going to post every day, Monday through Friday, maybe on the weekends every once in a while if I have something to say. But I'm going to post only things that are close to me, that I believe in, or something that has just recently happened. So it's relevant. And, the data supports the fact that by doing that, my reach has expanded a little bit. My connections have expanded, not at a crazy pace. My views of my profile have expanded. And those are people curious about what I'm talking about or what I'm doing. And the feedback I'm getting is very positive. Now, I'm not going to be, a Shea Rowbottom or an Alex B. Sheridan in my lifetime, but what they do produces that kind of following. They're just good at it, right? That's their thing. I'm in a different lane.
So take me back. You said content that we're talking about. Well, first, let me back up. for anybody watching, if you see people in my comments, I'm going to guarantee at least 50% of the people in my comments are current or past clients.
True.
So over 50% of people I worked with. So to your point earlier, which is if you see 10,000 views and 500 comments, you're going to get, they're not your buyers. That's a great guess. They're not buyers, they're fans, or they're just orbiters. They just like to get some dopamine for breakfast. I don't really do that. I mean, my brain is sort of taken off, but by and large, the foundation are current and past buyers who still hang out on my content every day without fail. And I don't, that to me is the testament of doing content the right way. Now, diving into my question with your CEO/pro hat on, if I came to you, you've never known this content strategy, and I said to you, we're going to start producing content on LinkedIn, and each one of your team members are going to do their own thing, and we're not going to talk about your company. Maybe once in a while we'll drop it, but we'll make sure the profile has the sort of a sales page to it. So if you walk over, you immediately know who we all work for. And two, it's going to take 3 to 6 months before we see any type of inbound.
Sure.
What would you say?
A year ago, well, 2 years ago, I would have said you're crazy. But now, because I've been doing it, and I've seen, as you mentioned, Refine Labs is one of the best examples. They have 12 people posting content every day, and by the way, you could join Refine Labs with no following, start posting, and in a month you'd have 12,000 followers. That's how that brand is uplifted individual. It's almost vice versa, right? So individual brands, but now they have a machine that lifts personal brands. I'm an interesting example, right? I run a stroke rehab company, but I also have an executive search firm. I'm not qualified to post a lot of content about stroke rehab. I'm not a therapist. I'm not knowledgeable in the space, but a lot of our team members, including our founder, is very well respected in the stroke rehab neurotherapy space. So when I joined the company, and I've been consulting with them for a year, we did just that. I said, all of you here are going to start posting daily content. Some of it will be personal about different journeys. Some of it, Henry's, will be very, very stroke centric. And just to your point, I want people just to see Saebo in the title, right? Who do they work for? Wow, that looks like a company with people with a point of view, and they're active and they're engaging. One woman, she was a little bit nervous and embarrassed in her team because she started a restaurant and it failed. I said, are you kidding me? That's gold. So she did a post about starting a restaurant in a bar and saying, I'm pregnant. I'm 8 months pregnant and I'm serving drinks. And all my friends told me not to start a restaurant. And they were right. But she said, here's the 5 things I learned when I did it. It was a great post, right? Had nothing to do with stroke rehab, but it built a brand around her and enriched her profile, and people got to know her. So, and by the way, 5 likes. I said, I don't care. Do another one tomorrow, right? And I said, we're going to measure as a whole our social media strategy in 1 year.
I've never heard anybody say that.
Yep.
It's always month to month.
No, we're going to do it in 1 year. We're going to look back and see how do we do it. Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to tune things and adjust content to do whatever, but I'm not going to measure success or failure for a year.
I just got fired. I'll admit it to everybody. I got fired. I got fired from an upstart sort of AI insurance company, right? They go in and they look at claims and they make predictions for the future to cut down, basically false positive, things like that. And my strategy was exactly what you just told your team. And the CEO of the company was always squirming in the chair. And he's watching right now. So I have nothing but respect for what they do. They're brilliant at what they do.
Sure.
I'm just being goofy. But he could not, for the life of him, understand. I showed them Gravy. I showed them Refine Labs. I showed him there's other people as well. And still didn't get it. He kept calling LinkedIn the black box, meaning he can't define it. He can't measure it. And he's an engineer by trade. And so he wants direct attribution for every single post. And like, it's gonna take time. You're gonna have to give it time. Just so when the pandemic started lifting, immediately books $30,000 to $40,000 on one event to go set up a conference table, for a conference. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, you're gonna get a bunch of emails, and then what? Who's gonna email them? And then what? They don't go to the conference to buy your product.
No.
They go to the conference so you can buy their product. So anyway, what advice would you give to somebody like that? Not to him specifically, he's a great guy, but we have a whole audience just like that. How to embrace content, the long burn, as you called it, and trust in a year. This could pay off.
Well, a couple things. First of all, you have to read the room. You got to know your audience, right? So when you think about you, which is why I kind of didn't fake that I was sleeping, right? When you think AI for insurance, can you think of anything more boring? Right? Like tax software.
I don't talk about AI for insurance. Talk about, fun times in engineering in the factory. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you got to recognize that and by the way, there's strength in this, but it's a very niche audience. So that's okay. But to build credibility in a niche audience means you have to really, really understand the buyer, like who actually purchases this software for a company. It's a small group of people, right? Audit, tax, compliance, whatever you want to think about, right? So when you build a content strategy, particularly in a B2B setting, it is a long haul, right?
The sales cycle, especially the prices, they're so long.
Oh, and
if you're dealing with the state level contracts, there's federal, state, and private. Those state contracts are multi-year sales cycles. They got to get approval for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll give you here's what I would recommend to them. First of all, get as many people in your organization, if it's a big company, posting about something in their space. And they don't have to post about, as your point, insurance. If they have people in marketing or sales, have them post strategies about marketing, right? Post about their challenge. Say, hey, you know what? I'm a B2B marketer focused on content in the AI insurance space. My days are tough. Here's what I figured out that works. Share something, right? So I call it peripheral content, right? It's around your message and your audience, but people see the logo, they start to see that there's cool people there. The other thing is you probably need to think of something, to your point, that's funny, that can differentiate. Let people know you have a sense of humor. There's a company called Brightfin Technologies, and Ed Roshish is the CEO. They have, by far, I think, one of the best internal marketing teams I've ever seen. They sell software that manages assets for companies. So if you have 1,000 remote employees, they all have a phone, they have a computer, they have a monitor. They need to be logged, tagged, serviced, whatever. It's boring. But guess what? If you're the IT manager for somebody with 1,000, it's a big deal. So they've created these amazingly hilarious videos about this, laughing at themselves. They laugh at themselves in the videos.
Oh, I need to check this out. Yeah.
Brightfin, check it out. Their video library, their marketing library is so good. They've chosen to be tongue-in-cheek about everything they say. They post as a company. All their people like their posts, follow their own posts, comment their posts. So now they're talking about, hey, what we do is really important. It's kind of boring. They actually say it's boring, but we've got really, really cool people. We've built a great company. Come join us. And so their recruiting is internally. They're not using recruiters because they've built a destination employer, because their marketing content is so good that potential candidates see it and go, I want to work for a company with that personality. So, think differently, take a long approach. And you mentioned attribution, such an important thing. Last touch attribution is almost a fallacy today. It's not measurable, because somebody may look at your LinkedIn content. They may have been on Instagram. They may have been on Facebook. They've done a Google search. They've read a blog post. They read an article. They have meandered around your content for 6 to 12 months. There's no way you can directly attribute that decision to one particular click. So in our company, I've told our marketing team, we will measure our results with one metric. How many new patients did we help this year? That is all we care about.
That's interesting.
That's it. Now we use tuning metrics. We we'll do A/B testing, we'll adjust our copy, but we won't measure the result unless we know we started this year with this many stroke survivors that we've helped, and we ended this year with this much. And last year, that was a growth rate of this. So if we've increased that growth rate, our marketing content has really made a difference.
Wow. That's giving me goosebumps because it's accurate and it's true. And so difficult when you get on sales call. For me, maybe I'm not a great sales guy, but trying to explain that. See, my audience is really true. The vast majority of my audience are solo professionals. They're easier to talk to. Okay. Then I've got B2B companies, smallish. Those are the most difficult ones for me to close because trying to explain it that way, I would almost need to hire you to come on my sales call and explain it to them. Then they'll listen to you, not me. You see, that's the weird thing. That's one of the things I respect about Chris Walker, even though I find him annoying because everybody loves him. And which is great. That's the competitive.
Young, good-looking guys with hair, Doug.
Competitive. Yeah. So, but he's able to get on a call, or a meeting, and explain the unknown and make it known. So I give him all the credibility in the world. I've struggled with that on the B2B side. The solo professional, I have a pretty good, close rate if they have the finances to do it.
Yeah.
We're pretty much going to do it. On the other side, it's a tough sell. They're so tough to close. Any tips for me, man?
Well, there's three important thoughts there that you just brought up, Doug. Number one is on a solopreneur, whether they're a recruiter or they're a business coach or somebody that you're helping them drive presence, it's a lot shorter from content to a click or a view or a sale, right? They can see that a little faster. B2B, the sales cycles are so long. It has so many paths it has to travel to through an SDR, a BDR, to an account exec, to somebody closing the deal. So it's hard to measure it back. Here's what I try to get both B2B players as well as solopreneurs to understand about their LinkedIn presence and their content, right? And most of us, remember, we're doing this on LinkedIn, right? You can do some other things socially, but those are more consumer-based products. If you're using LinkedIn and B2B content, I view my LinkedIn profile, I view all of my content as a way to build my personal brand, as you just described. It's my personal brand, and some people might like it, some people don't. But the thing that I found very successful is if I'm reaching out to a potential candidate or a potential customer, and they have seen any of my content over a period of time, if the content's good, they'll go, okay, has a point of view, probably a thought leader. I'm going to go look at his profile and maybe their website. And in my podcast, same thing. I've had many candidates say the only reason I'm talking to you versus the other 10,000 recruiters that reached out to me is I listened to your podcast and I know who you are. And same thing with companies, right? They go, oh, you've got a podcast. We're trying to do a podcast. I listened to a couple episodes. Could you help us? So now I have other firms reaching out to me to give them LinkedIn advice, which I find hilarious because I'm not an influencer. So if you can take a long view, if you can use your content to touch people frequently over a longer period of time, and then when they are ready to make a decision and they go check you out, you have a body of work that says this person is credible. It skips a lot of right? You don't have to get on the call with them and blurb out your brochure. That's already been done, right? They already want to speak with you.
That's a great thing. It's almost like you want to challenge them. So how did you find me? And it's like, well, your content. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how they're going to find you. And they just can't wrap their heads around. Now, one more thing. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that organic content is stronger than paid content? Or do you feel a hybrid for your companies over time? It's a better strategy over time? Because I feel that when you're talking about such a long sales cycle, you might want to roll out some ads and get some buzz going that way while you build up the organic. Which, in my opinion, organic will be stronger than paid over time, but never at the beginning. What's your opinion about paid versus organic or hybrid about?
So I would say hybrid, but I would put more emphasis on organic than paid. And it depends on your sales cycle. Paid.
Let's go with your company, your type of company.
So I'll give you examples. So Saebo, our company, with some of the changes Facebook made and Google made, we saw a drop in organic content, right? Everybody's seen it. And it impacted sales, right? I mean, we have an e-com store. We also have a B2B store, product that we sell directly to hospitals, but we saw it. And when we have paid attention to organic, when we've been thoughtful about consistently posting organic, everything just gets better. Everything's better. I mean, our website traffic's better. Our conversion rate is better. Now we're trying to be more thoughtful on our entire digital marketing approach, right? So our goal, and we just built out a whole new digital team. Our goal is to put a piece of content in every one of our channels every single day. Every day, something goes into one of our channels. And when we create a piece of content, we have to understand 3 or 4 things. Number one, what's the content? Video, blog post, article, text post, whatever, image. Who's it for, right? Who cares about this? That sometimes determines where we post it, right? If this is for the director of rehab at a large hospital, that's going to go to LinkedIn and have a very specific target audience. If it's for a stroke survivor, it might go to our Facebook page or to advertise around a Facebook social group around stroke survivors, right? We know who those audiences are. If it's brand building, we put it out there. We don't expect to see conversions. We don't care. It's brand building. So we have a what it is, who it's for, how we're going to measure it, right? And how long we think it'll take for us to see any impact. And I said, we can put months and years in there, folks. It doesn't have to be 30 days, 60 days. Some of it can be, we're not going to measure it. That's okay. But as long as there's a purpose and an audience. So we get very thoughtful to build out our plan. And then we decide what type of posts we're going to do. Sometimes it's a testimonial. Very few times do we actually we don't promote our products or our company in our organic content.
Okay.
That's where paid comes in.
Okay.
So product placements, product listing ads. When we do a paid search, we have that's something where we want to be a little more tactical, right? I'm running an ad. I want to direct people to a specific landing page about a product, but it only works if the organic stuff has been there for a while, right? It works if they've heard about our brand. They know we're experts, we're compassionate. And then when they see the call to action in an ad and we direct them to the right landing page, they go, oh, well, now we know exactly why I'm looking at this particular product because my uncle had a stroke last week. So that's, I think, where we start to dig in some of the conversion rate optimization and some of the specific things about different trends in our paid stuff. But I think that you have the foundation of any digital strategy is your organic. The bottom of the funnel stuff you get on the paid side is really, really important. And that's where you start to see the rubber meet the road, so to speak.
This if anybody listening to it, all 5 people, you can make a lot of money off this type of stuff that's coming out of Peter's mouth. I do want to say one thing to add my 3 cents adjusted for inflation. One of the best paid ad organic combo I've ever done is with a sales trainer. And we said, first 4 months, it's just going to be organic. We're going to go hard organic. Like, we're going to post every single day. It's going to have links that you could go to get free stuff. It's just going to be a very powerful present.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to scrape every single patient email that ever followed up, and we're going to retarget them in Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram Reels, more specifically. And it just went through the roof. So the thing that most companies do is they do it the opposite way. They put an offer on Instagram or wherever, and you're scrolling. Keep in mind the psychology of a person on Instagram, TikTok. They're not in buying mode. They're scrolling. So they don't know who you are. The rate of cut is so micro tiny that it doesn't really do a whole lot. Having a brand, so if you're on LinkedIn, you know this guy, oh wow, he's got bald head, he's smooth, and then whoa, he's on my Instagram. Oh, I'm going to click and I'm going to go. So it just does a lot better that way. So I highly recommend anybody trying to find that right mix. Obviously, Chris Walker and his team, from what he said publicly, do it much different. They don't do straight call to action. They do ungated content, paid. I've never been able to get anybody to agree to that. So never. I've tried it once. They said, no, it's call to action. We want, we're not paying people to read free content. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go say, oh, go check out Chris Walker. No, I'm not going to do that. You're going to stay with me, man.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're running out of time. So thank you for joining us. I wish we could do this again. There's a lot in your brain that I would love to unpack. Is there any last second CEO strategy thing? Because to me, it seems like you got your life in balance. You got a loving family that you're present for. You've got your business, but you got your health that you look after. How do you find that balance for people, for yourself?
So
There's
before
no
I
such
start,
thing as balance, I realize. But how do you define balance?
I just did a post about that, that work-life balance is difficult. I think they all blend together, right? When you show up to do a podcast like this, Doug, if your son is sick, that's going to be in the back of your mind the whole call, right? And tonight when you're making dinner with your family, you still have the fact that you've got 3 pieces of content to write the next morning. It all blends together. So
yesterday, my son was sick at school and I had to leave.
Yeah.
My work, go get him and then go get the help. My work just completely, by the time you get back, you can't just start writing again.
Yep. I would recommend following a guy named John Mccaskill on LinkedIn. John is a former Navy SEAL commander, and he has a podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness. He sounds very familiar. Yeah, he's been a guest on my podcast. But a couple tips that he does, and again, John's an expert in this, I'm not, is in order to weather all the stress, you have to actually thoughtfully think about it. You have to plan to decompress. So before I start my LinkedIn routine every morning at 5:30, I do about 30 minutes of meditation, right? So prayer, just some deep breathing exercises. I clear my head, right? I get right spiritually, which is a big part of my life, right? It's kind of faith, family, fitness, finances, and then my community. So that every morning, if I do that, I just tend to approach the day differently. And then by getting some sort of an exercise routine, that releases the right chemicals, it de-stresses. And I try to make sure I never miss a day. Now, sometimes that routine is at 7 a.m. Sometimes it's at 8 a.m. Sometimes it's at 6 o'clock at night, depending on my schedule. But I make sure I block the time and I do it. And then the other thing is seek help, right? I think to your point, Doug, whether it's a mentor, a friend, reach out to someone and just periodically go have coffee with them. Find someone that maybe shares similar type of struggles, right? I got work, I got family, I'm struggling, and just find a confidant. Sometimes I don't want to put that burden on my wife. We talk a lot. So sometimes you want to take it to somebody who's not going to take it home with them, right? They just had a light conversation with you. And it's also a learning. We learn from each other when we do that, but it's also kind of a good way to de-stress. And I think the last thing is, there's life and there's work. Life is more important than work, right? If life comes up, you send a note to your team or to somebody else, say, hey, look, I apologize. This project's going to be a day late. I had to take care of some things. And if you tell them ahead of time, that goes over just fine. If you just don't show up or it's a day late without letting them know, that doesn't go over well. If you communicate, people tend to be very respectful, particularly nowadays. So don't be afraid to say, I need a little more time. I got to take the afternoon off. I got to turn my screen off. I just need time to just decompress. That's okay. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that.
This has been an awesome hour with you. So folks, I'm going to leave Peter's stuff in the description below. Check him out for sure. There's a lot of knowledge in his brain. He needs to bring out in a book or two. So thank you, Peter, for your time. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, man?
Doug, I appreciate it. Thanks much.
Shoot.